Hey, welcome to Return to Reason. My name's David. I'm honored to have the opportunity to welcome Mike Schouten today. Mike Schouten is the Director of Advocacy for an organization called ARPA Canada. Both professionally and personally, he has a unique perspective in how MAiD is being talked about here in Canada and what really needs to change in order to truly give people death with compassion and dignity. This conversation might surprise you. Stay tuned.
Today, a special episode of Return to Reason, where knowledge and wisdom intersect.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. You've got quite a personal story when it comes to this involvement, but maybe let us know a little bit about how you've become passionate about talking about MAiD and what it means in that process. Tell us a bit about that.
Sure, yeah. Thank you for having me on. It's always good to be able to talk about these things in this type of setting, so I'm excited to spend some time with you. The organization I work for, ARPA Canada, ARPA, stands for Association for Reform Political Action. We've been active on the euthanasia file for a long, long time, even before it became legal in Canada. That activity's obviously been heightened since 2015 when the court struck down Canada's euthanasia laws that prohibited assisted suicide. And then obviously there was a bill that followed in Parliament in 2016, another bill in 2021. And here we are today on the edge of making euthanasia legal to people with mental illness as the sole underlying condition. So we've come a long way, really, really fast in our country. We're one of the most permissive regimes in the entire world. And that's resulting in in 2021, over 10,000 people requesting and receiving medical assistance and dying. So there's huge concerns, obviously from an organization like ARPA Canada, which values life. This is deeply concerning, but more and more, we're also seeing that concern grow amongst other areas of society where everyday Canadians are just waking up to the reality that, wow, I know somebody with mental illness, and if this was made available to them, that wouldn't be a good thing. Right? We've come a long way in our country in helping people deal with mental health issues and encouraging them to reach out. And now at the same time, we're going to make it legal for them to give into their despair and have a state complicit in giving into their despair and killing them, ending their life.
A couple of questions for you is you mentioned 2015 when it did become legal in Canada. Now we have progressed pretty quickly, as you were saying, in those 7-8 years since we've done that. Why the progression? Why is there such a fast lane that we're running down in Canada?
I think the simple answer to that is because once you cross that line whereby it's legal for some people to end the lives of other people, it's very, very hard to draw regulations around that's going to stop you from sliding down this slippery slope which we've slid down. If it's legal for someone who's at the end of their life because of a terminal illness, and it's very clear that within days their life is going to end, then why can't it be legal for people whose life might end within 10 years or 20 years? Or now, right, we're dealing with situations where people are reaching out to homeless shelters and to what we think of the veterans in Canada who deal with PTSD, reaching out for help, the helplines that are available to them, and then having this suggested. So it's really fascinating how when you make euthanasia legal for some and want to make it their right to request and receive it, you actually, and we've seen that now manifest, you ensure that everyone is asked to consider it. And that's reaping very negative implications in our country. And I do want to share with you a personal story, if I may, because in 2021, our 17-year-old son at the time was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma. So that's a very rare form of bone cancer and often a deadly form of bone cancer. And we pursued treatment for Marcus, our son, for 12 months. And we came to the point in March of 2022 where it was no longer an option to try to treat him for cure. It just wasn't working. So we have this lived experience now whereby our son Marcus endured cancer, incredible suffering. He essentially drowned to death as his lungs filled with tumors. But we were also the benefactors of an incredible hospice and palliative care system in our country. And that was the message we heard right from the start when Marcus's oncologist gave us the bad news that there was nothing more they could do. Marcus asked him, he said, well, how much longer do I have, doc? And he said, We don't know, but what we do know is that every day you do have, we're going to make sure it's a good one for you.
Wow.
And even though his quality of life deteriorated over the next 2 months, he passed away in May of 2022. Every day there was something to be thankful for. Every day there was something to be joyful about. And that's because the people around Marcus, his medical team, us as parents, his family, all were focused on quality of living.
More of this conversation in a few minutes.
We're sorry for your loss, and so you have obviously a very personal experience with this, and of you guys walking through. Was the option of MAiD ever presented to you guys as you were walking this out with Marcus?
No, I can say thankfully that it never was,
Yeah.
and we were so thankful because we know that if Marcus's doctors or us would have entertained that or talked about that,
Yeah.
that he would have heard, oh, they're giving up on me.
Yeah.
And that would have had an incredibly negative impact on his disposition towards life and towards his suffering and towards just trying to make every day a good day.
Okay, can you maybe speak on a little bit, if that becomes common in Canada, presenting and walking down that path, what kind of weight would that add to the situation walking through it?
Well, it's a challenge for us to try to understand how that would have played out if it would have been presented to us in that situation. But we know that just knowing Marcus and ourselves and people who are enduring suffering, if the people around them, especially their medical teams, are not focused on your life is going to get terrible, there's going to be incredible pain. So it's about perspective, right? If that's the perspective that's placed on a patient, on someone who's enduring the suffering, that's going to increase the despair. And I mean, granted, of course there's despair. Somebody, especially a 18-year-old kid, gets told that you're not going to live very long anymore. That can lead to despair. So then it's up to us as human beings surrounding that fellow human being to try to address that despair, not by feeding the despair. But I do want to reference, I did earlier, the veterans in our country, because that was brought to light last fall when numerous veterans were reaching out to the hotline for Veterans Affairs Canada, looking for help, not looking for medical assistance in dying. And when the person on the other end of the line brought that subject into the conversation, they were led to despair, which in turn led them to reach out to media and to try to tell their story and say, hey, what's going on in our country? I wasn't looking for this, and all of a sudden it's on the table as an option.
Yeah.
That means that the person I've been talking to and looking to for help is now trying to affirm to me that my life's not worth living anymore, and I might want to consider ending it. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot of things to be concerned about. So back to your earlier question, right, about would we support as an organization or even personally someone's request for euthanasia in any instance? We wouldn't, but we truly believe that if we come to each other's aid rather than affirming their despair, that the request for euthanasia would be far less than it is today.
It's interesting. Hey, so you also mentioned on what you're speaking about, it sounds like the goalposts seem to be widening regarding acceptance of people who want to use this. And also with the addition of mental illness being now potentially acceptable regarding that. Why is legislation from our government changing to have such a wide goalposts for allowing people through?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's hard to answer in full because from the work that we do and the people we talk to, often it appears as though the people who are advocating most for expanding euthanasia to more and more are people who are able-bodied and well. They don't have a terminal illness. They don't have mental illness. And their push to expand it, I think, is because of what they think might come in the last days of their life. Or if they ever get Alzheimer's, they don't want to live. They just want somebody to end their life. So my wife and I had an opportunity, an invitation to speak to a parliamentary committee that's reviewing Canada's euthanasia laws. And so we shared our story of Marcus's suffering and death and made some recommendations to them in regards to expanding it to mature minors, to children. And recommended they don't do that. But in the course of that meeting, there were a lot of exchanges between ourselves and members of parliament and senators. And we could really feel there that they were seeking to advance this because of what they feared might come for themselves.
Okay.
And I think that that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate that people have that disposition. That again speaks to that perspective that I talked about earlier, where if you or I or anybody thinks about suffering, of course we would dread that, if you will. We wouldn't wish that on anybody. We wouldn't want to endure that ourselves. But we live in a country where if that does occur, and we know that everyone's going to endure suffering in one form or another, that the tools can be there to assist each other and help each other through that. We need to do that with people who have a terminal illness like Marcus. We need to do that with people who have mental illness and do have suicidal thoughts. We need to surround them with the tools they need and the compassion that is required to bring them out of that and help them see their life as worth living.
More on this topic after the break.
So what are some of the main initiatives that you are working and ARPA is doing to help educate people when it comes to assisted suicide and euthanasia? What are you guys working on right now?
Mm-hmm. So it's called the Care Not Kill campaign. So if your viewers just go to carenotkill.ca, that's the URL. And what we're doing through that is a couple of things. Primarily is just educating Canadians as to what's going on, because it's quite surprising how many Canadians still are not aware that euthanasia is legal, that it's legal for so many people for a multitude of reasons. And when they become aware of that and understand the consequences, the implications of it, and how many people are requesting and receiving it, they're concerned as well. So a big part of that website and that campaign is just educating Canadians. But then there is also a part that is about action. ARPA Canada, in the acronym, uses the word action. We're very much an organization that doesn't want to just sit on the sidelines and complain about things. We want to find solutions. So encouraging people to get in touch with their members of parliament, explain their concern, either through phone calls, emails, visits to your member of parliament. We also have on the website flyers that people can distribute into their neighborhoods, just simple flyers that are non-offensive, but again, educate people as to what's happening. And we want to build on that because we're starting to see fruit. And one of the fruits was just prior to Christmas, the Liberal government, Justice Minister David Lametti, announced that they were going to delay the next expansion of euthanasia. So it's set to kick in March of this year, whereby people with mental illness can avail themselves of it. And he indicated that as a government, they've heard Canadians. There seems to be a lot of alarm amongst our country, and they're going to put the brakes on a little bit.
You mentioned solutions, not just sitting on the sidelines. Are you guys trying to propose alternatives, or do you have other solutions that could repeal, or what would go in place if you replace what's currently now legal in Canada with assisted suicide?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we certainly do on a number of fronts. So ARPA Canada is very much in favor of working incrementally. So step by step, you work on what you can achieve, and then you go on to the next thing. On our website, arpacanada.ca, there's numerous initiatives that would slowly change this, redirect it. So some of them have to do with euthanasia as it relates to people with disabilities.
Sure.
Some of them have to do with euthanasia as it relates to the different safeguards that are in place and trying to put in more stringent safeguards.
Yeah.
But then also at the same time, we have done some work and we have some policy papers on palliative care. We need a more robust palliative care system in our country. The experience that we had with Marcus in the child tract, if you will, BC Children's Hospital, Canuck Place Children's Hospice, was incredible. And while that was happening, I know, and you probably know of others, adults, maybe in their 50s and 60s, who get a cancer diagnosis, and it seems to take forever to get an appointment. It seems to take forever to find a solution for this symptom they've just now also developed, or this type of suffering. And we never had that with Marcus. They were always one step ahead. And that enabled us just to spend our time with him, to spend the final months and weeks and days with him, not worrying about where to get the latest medication and which specialist we had to go visit. No, they were always ahead of us and were able to address those symptoms as they arose, which gave us time to just love our son and spend the final days with him.
Wow.
So I think that there's a lot we can learn from how we treat children in the hospice and palliative care programs. And if those are engaged and improved amongst adults in our country, that will go a long way to making people think that their lives are still worth living, even though they're far different than they used to be.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought about creating a very robust palliative care system to help people. Generally, I know there's physicians all across the country, but it's hard to be specific with so many. But can you generalize about where physicians stand on MAiD? Is there an equal split, whether 50% are for or against? Where are physicians generally in response to MAiD in Canada?
I think it's not 50-50. There's certainly more physicians who are not in favor of it and uncomfortable with it.
Okay.
And it's for that reason that we've seen sometimes at a provincial level and at a College of Physicians and Surgeons level, where what's called conscience legislation has been enacted, where people feel their consciences are being binded, and that's because there's not enough people actually to facilitate requests for MAiD. So I think there's far more who are uncomfortable with it and wouldn't be involved with it. If MAiD just becomes like a regular tool in their suite of options for how to treat a patient, we're going to see it increase even more than it has in the past. Like within 5 years, we've already seen a 10-fold increase, and I can see that continuing if we don't put the brakes on and find a way to stop this slide.
Is there incentive for the government to continue with legislation towards making euthanasia more accessible? Do they operate with that, do you believe?
It's hard to know if the government operates with that. There certainly have been some advocacy groups on the other side who have cited economic reasons as to why we should make MAiD more available.
Yeah.
I think usually Canadians' reaction to that is not very friendly, though, because that just sounds so callous towards humanity in general.
Yeah.
We pride ourselves. Yeah. Like Canadians have a hard enough time describing what their identity is as a Canadian, but many will cite our universal healthcare system. They'll say this is a great product of Canada. Thanks, Tommy Douglas, etc.
Yeah.
Well, if that healthcare system is faltering so much now that people are just, instead of receiving the help that we think they should get, just requesting MAiD, that doesn't sit well with folks. And they're more and more looking to their governments to correct this rather than just make it more available. So, yeah, the economic reason, I mean, we can all recognize that there are economic benefits, if you will. If someone doesn't need care for months or weeks or years, then that's going to be a saving. That's a cost saving. But if we start to look at life that way, that puts us in a pretty scary place.
Totally. It's if you're to sit down with someone who just maybe knew what they heard from the news or whatever about MAiD, they don't really have a lot of knowledge, just that what's being said about it in maybe a positive light. What would you say to them to show them where you stand on it? Man, I'm asking because maybe we can educate people who have the same stance as you about this, that might not know how to speak to people about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's actually that's a big part of our Care Not Kill campaign is walking people through that. How do you talk to the average Canadian? How do you talk about this? And one of the phrases we use is, we need to encourage people to think about suicide prevention, not suicide assistance. So in that, we're trying to get people not to separate the issues of suicide and euthanasia, make sure that they're connected, and then talk about how we want to work to prevent suicide, not assist. And then we relate it to just things that everybody knows. For example, right, if someone is thinking about committing suicide, we do everything we can to try to help them not see that as an option. And put them in touch with professionals and others who can help them deal with those suicide desires. We'll go so far as shutting down entire highway systems or bridges if someone's threatening to jump. We should not then, on the other hand, open up regulations to allow them to just have the state meet that desire and their life for them. So trying to relate to people in everyday language so they understand it. And especially, again, to the mental illness one, most people know someone that's struggling with anxiety or some form of mental illness. And to just talk about how we need to love those people. And people, that's what Canadians are doing right now. Just encouraging people to talk to their neighbors about despair and suffering,
Yeah.
and how it is a part of life, and we can reach out to each other in ways that encourage living, not dying.
Yeah. Interesting point you bring up with Bell Let's Talk Day, which is a massive day that's been growing over years about helping people with mental illness, and you could argue that euthanasia and MAiD is almost giving people an easy way out and advocating for ending your own suffering in a sense. Hey, if people want to help you guys, support you, follow what you're doing, can you let them know how they can best connect with you guys?
Sure, yeah. So on both those sites, carenotkill.ca, as well as our website, arpacanada.ca, so ARPA Canada.ca, you can sign up for our newsletter. So you'll be then kept in touch with us because the developments are changing so quickly on this topic, and then therefore the action items that we ask of people are changing. That's the best way to stay in touch. And then, if you do have viewers who are from outside Canada, we're very encouraged that the international community is also recognizing where Canada's going and expressing alarm. And internationally, there's jurisdictions around the world whose leaders are also putting pressure on Canada to do something about this. So if you're from outside Canada, we thank you for your support. And if you want to support us, simply go to those websites, and you can find ways to do so there.
Awesome. Well, it's been great chatting with you today, Mike. I appreciate you taking the time to let us know about what you guys are doing. We wish you all the best and looking forward to doing this again.
Thank you, David.
You are an essential part of this series. Support truth, knowledge, and wisdom by sharing this show with a friend. Visit returntoreason.tv. There, you can subscribe to our newsletter by clicking Become an Insider. Get the latest articles, episodes, and exclusive content. It's Return to Reason.